Good day, I am Kese and I'm joined by my partner John Noel Villamore today. We are going to delve into the fascinating topic of object-oriented ethics. Let's explore this intriguing subject together. In the dissertation, René Descartes is labeled as the villain within its context due to his foundational role in advancing the dogmatic modern subjectivism. He suggests that if we don't actively entertain a clear and distinct idea, which, because we're finite, can't be achieved forever, we fall back on the authority of accepted knowledge. For this, it was considered that he played a significant role in shaping the philosophical approach characterized by an unwavering emphasis on the individual self and subjective experience. Despite the criticism this idea received, it does the subtle work of disclosing a crack in the bedrock of prioricity. Heidegger's insight from being and time, he stated that every understanding always precedes knowledge. It suggests that before a person can come up with a clear and distinct idea, theoretical knowledge is accepted understanding. Contrasting Descartes' approach, Heidegger point is state that rather than a person having an original truth to which one knew nothing because one is always in the state of understanding, in possession of accepted knowledge. In simple terms, it argues that individuals are always in a state of understanding, immersed in a world of objects and relationship that manifests as complex network of demands, even if they are often perceived as obscure. Individuals are constantly subject to the demands of objects, allowing for the exploitation of objects for personal benefit. And ethics involves the ongoing interpretation of these demands and the moral responsibility to balance personal prejudice with the needs of others and environment. This topic also explores the fundamental link between the difference and interpretation at an ontological level. It highlights the concept of plurivocity in phenomenal existence, underpinned by univocity of being in ontology. Drawing from Deleuze and Guattari, it introduces the idea of a plane consistency as a material milieu of origination that enables relationality among phenomena. This ontological consistency is characterized by incommensurability, emphasizing the irreducible primacy of difference as a condition for being. It suggests that all objects share a fundamental sameness in their inherent difference. The passage also discusses Heidegger's perspective on being with others and the notion of exposure to the other, which complements the ethical concept of imposition. It includes by contrasting this view with Heidegger's humanism, arguing with the dynamics of exposition-imposition vary in degree rather than in kind among beings on the plane of consistency. The passage emphasizes the interplay between difference and relationality within a dynamic ontology, shedding light in the role of interpretation. It underscores that relationality operates in an analogical rather than digital manner, enabling entities on the plane of consistency to exist simultaneously as both the same and different, near and distance, and touching and not touching. This analogical relationality necessitates interpretation as an essential mechanism of conjunction. Drawing from Heidegger, it describes interpretation as a process of binding and separating that can be seen as form of relating. This means that every interobjectival relation is inherently an act of interpretation, as articulated by Alan Bass, involving both differentiation and integration. The passage concludes that in contrast to certain perspective, there is no completely non-relational being. Interpretation is an inescapable and intrinsic feature of existence, as all entities are subject to exposure and interaction, rejecting the idea of completely isolated and self-contained entity. Diving into the idea that objects engage in interpretive relationships with varying degrees of authenticity. Authenticity, as defined by Jan Patoka, involves allowing everything to exist as it is, without distortion or denial of its nature. It emphasizes that being is more than a static presence and should be seen as self-presentation of demands. Authentic interpretation thus extends beyond passive indifference, embodying responsibility, care, attention, respect, and even love and liberation. The Heideggerian concept of letting be is rooted in Patoka's understanding and implies a transformative shift in how individuals relate to the world. This transformation transcends the traditional theory or practice divide, blurring the lines between theory and practice, as both involve implicit manifestations of certain theoretical attitudes.
There is a common human suspicion regarding the role of interpretation in various forms of relational behavior. This skepticism arises because the concept of interpretation, often associated with Nietzschean ideas, appears to challenge the notion of objective facts and suggests a form of relativism. It argues that this skepticism is rooted in a historical tendency to view interpretation from a subjective perspective. However, it suggests that scholars like Luigi Parson and his student Gianni Vattimo propose an alternative object-oriented approach that offers valuable insights for addressing moral and aesthetic challenges in social life, indicating that interpretation can be viewed from a non-subjective standpoint, providing new perspectives on understanding human relationships and experiences. There is limitations of objective standards in modern ethics, such as rationality, affect, or pleasure maximization, which attempt to simplify the complex task of navigating life with others. The text argues that these standards, grounded in the subject, are products of a specific historical context and do not represent perfectly self contained subjects or purely objective views of reality. Instead, it suggests that the truth lies in the middle ground between subjectivity and objectivity. This middle ground rejects the idea of an abstract subject object hybrid that alternatively acknowledges personal involvement in interpretation and seeks entirely objective understanding of facts, emphasizing the need to recognize the dynamic interplay between subjectivity and objectivity in ethical considerations. The paper challenges the notion that every object can be reduced to its set of relations, which might imply a form of social atomism. However, the text argues against this by emphasizing the irreducibility of objects as singular entities that simultaneously interact with, respond to, and impose themselves upon others. These singular objects serve as a focal point where demands emerge, extending beyond the boundaries of rigid individuals and their biases. This dynamic is described as a pursuit of telos without terminus, characterized by an ongoing task of bearing truth. It compels us to perceive objects in an interrogative mode, recognizing them as non totalizable entities with their own demands, appeals, and directives, thus rejecting the reduction of objects to mere relational components. It was also discussed the Western intellectual and cultural heritage shaped by the Platonic Greeks and the Judeo-Christian tradition. It suggests that this tradition often laments a perceived fall from an original privileged state of unity, where the whole is inherently known and its parts are illuminated. This idea is reflected in origin stories like Genesis, the Tower of Babel, and Plato's accounts of immortality in Phaedo. However, the passage challenges the notion of an original unity, proposing that reality, even in its entirety, is inherently fractured and plural, characterized more by difference than unity. It questions the dichotomy between subjectivity and objectivity, suggesting that if nature is inherently multifaceted, this binary view no longer holds, highlighting the complex and diverse nature of existence. The paper also discusses the challenges posed by speculative realism and object-oriented philosophy, which aim to address the anthropocentric issues stemming from post-Kantian metaphysics. However, it highlights a significant shortcoming in these contemporary approaches, particularly in Graham Harman's view where real objects, whether human or otherwise, are considered non-phenomenal and isolated from all relations, overshadowing their sensory facets. This approach, instead of overcoming the subject-object divide associated with transcendental idealism, extends it to encompass everything. While it presents an appealing ontological egalitarianism, it carries politically questionable implications, including tendencies towards quietism and even nihilism. Due to its identification of the real with the ineffable and the isolation of objects from the surroundings, which raises concerns about its impact on ethical and political thought. Justin Harmon puts forth the argument that real objects are intricately entangled in a profusion of relations at the phenomenal level, resulting in each relation being both underdetermined, and underdetermining. This perspective is presented as a meta-ethical alternative to two prevailing approaches in the field. On one side, theological ethics, as a form of a moral absolutism, places the God-human relationship as the foundational element upon which all morality depends. On the other side, secular philosophical ethics takes a similar stance but centers on the human-human relationship as the bedrock of morality. In contrast, Harmon challenges both of these views by asserting that morality is not exclusively tied to either divine or human interactions but arises from the intricate web of relations involving real objects. Lastly, Harmon concludes by introducing contrasting viewpoints contending that ethical norms originate from a proto-ethicality inherent in the essence of reality itself. These norms persist even in the absence of God and humanity's perceived moral superiority in the universe. It references John Baptist Clement, a character in Camus' novel The Fall, who argues that religions go astray when they impose moral rules and commandments, asserting that God is not necessary for the creation of guilt and punishment. Clement suggests that fellow humans, with the individual's participation, are sufficient for these moral considerations. While we may not be able to change certain circumstances, we have the choice to close our eyes to them. However, doing so risks transforming a genuine tragedy into a farcical repetition marked by the dulling of humor due to the ease of repeated mistakes, challenging traditional moral frameworks and highlighting the complexity of human ethics and responsibility. And that would be all for our report about the object oriented ethics by Justin Harmon. Thank you and goodbye.